Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, Chatting with ISO Experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis. Today I'm here again with Norman Verbeck, consultant at Core. Glad you could join us again.
Glad to be here again.
Awesome. Well, last week we had you here and we discussed common pitfalls in a QMS. Today we're talking about how to maintain your QMS. Similar, but giving you some more proactivity there. But before digging into that, let's hear about your journey. And I have another quick question. Do you run the toilet paper over the front or over the back?
Absolutely over the front.
Absolutely. Yep. You want bangs, not a mullet.
That's exactly
the mullet
right.
was the 80s. So I actually have a family member who shall remain nameless that does it the other way. And I'm like, how could you not do it front ways? And if you ever see the actual picture of the actual patent, it shows it over the front. So if anybody's out there, make sure you correct that. But a little
right.
silliness. We learned about a little about your journey last week. Anything else you'd like to share?
Pretty much, again, most of my experiences in the manufacturing environment. I've had, a lot of experience over the last 5 years working with service-based companies as well. But yeah, the ISO standards are definitely very friendly to all types of businesses. So, manufacturers or service companies, but
so you got that history, plus now you're helping everybody with consulting, and really do appreciate that. Well, let's get started. We're talking again about how to maintain your QMS. How can companies assure that they're incorporating ISO into their daily operations and not just a separate project?
So one of the big ones is making sure, we talked about this last week a little bit, was leadership commitment, making sure your leaders are engaged, that they're helping, basically the system's helping them drive like strategic planning and decision-making. They're allocating resources, but leadership commitment's a big one.
Well, I think it's something that if you show from the get-go as leadership that we're not just doing this to pass an audit. We're not just doing this to get that piece of paper that we need to get the contract, but we're making an investment into this to make our company better. They're going to probably help see that down the line.
Yep, it's important to make it part of the culture. So, normalizing some of that ISO language into everyday conversations. So again, some of the terminology is a little different than what most companies use.
Right.
But it's, the training can come into play with making people, get a little more comfortable, familiar with, some of the concepts that are within the ISO standards.
Yeah. Some of the lingo. I know when I started here at Core, because I don't have an ISO background, and just the number of TLAs. What? Huh? But, and actually in our switching over to being part of LRQA, we actually had a little dictionary because LRQA is based out of England and over the pond. So what they call something, we call a little different, and we kind of want to know what we're talking about. So maybe some of that might not be a bad idea if you're incorporating that.
Absolutely. So it's important to embed the requirements that you're putting in place into your normal business process. So you don't want it just to be a quality department activity. Right. Again, quality is everybody's job. Right. But basically making sure things are aligning with business processes. It's important to integrate with the performance metrics that you're measuring as a business. So track, performance improvement, customer satisfaction, non-conformities, what are the improvement initiatives that we're taking on over time. Again, making sure that the responsibility is kind of cross-functional across the different departments, not just siloed within the quality department.
And you did say about communication before. It really is important to understand that you're doing that to get the best snapshot and picture of your business with all of those metrics to know the best decisions to make and find out where problems are.
Over time, it's important to integrate and embed that within your just normal daily work. So your continuous improvement efforts, identify things when problems arise. Just because, again, you might be experiencing a problem, but there's it's more than likely that other people are experiencing that as well.
Right.
So,
right.
But it's also important to keep things simple and practical. So don't overcomplicate the system. Don't make overly complex procedures. It's important to kind of boil it down, simplify things. You get too much detail. Sometimes that can, again, it doesn't really leave much wiggle room sometimes with, how you want to do things.
Right. And when you're looking at your processes, make sure you're getting the people that do the job involved. And that helps with buy-in.
Absolutely. And things change. So when you do put procedures or processes in place, you want to make sure you're reviewing those periodically just to make sure that anything you've documented or, your training materials are up to date so that they're relevant and clear.
Right.
And
It's not the machine that we replaced 2 months ago, but we have the documentation for the old machine.
absolutely.
How to use it.
That's
and
right.
all the differences.
Yep. And the big thing is using ISO or your QMS as a tool, not just a checklist. So if you kind of focus on the intent behind some of the clauses, it's not just compliance. It's really just general good business practice.
Right.
And should drive improvements over time. So
That's important.
absolutely. When you do your internal audits, don't just look at it as a compliance exercise. So audits should be focused on, making sure the processes are effective and you're identifying risks or, it's not always a non-conformance. It could be maybe you identify an opportunity for improvement during those audits with talking with people throughout the course of it.
Whenever you get the word audit, assessment, people get scared. And this isn't something, it's not a performance review of you. It's looking at what you do and making sure that is at its most optimal. And if there's problems, to correct them. It's going to be a non-conformance, but that lets you correct it. And if there isn't, but there's a way to improve it, wouldn't you want somebody to tell you that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just even in general life, you typically learn from your mistakes, over time. So, it's important to identify those. And then, when you do identify those to, again, share that information.
And if I didn't have a spouse, I wouldn't know all the things I do wrong.
That's right.
That little joke there, but if I look at it from a realistic and comparative kind of point of view, I've become a better person because I didn't see the kind of person that I am to people outside. So that's just a good comparison to something like that. It's okay to be told, to find out that you're not doing something the perfect way or the best way.
Yep.
So we're talking about really getting them combined and into one. So it's not a separate thing. But how can a company ensure the documentation is accurate, up to date, and available? So let's say, you've already passed the audit, you're a couple of years later. How can you ensure that documentation that you've put together or maybe are putting together is accurate, up to date, and available?
Yeah, so like we talked about last week, the big piece is doing those periodic reviews. And it's really making sure you have a robust document control system in place.
Right.
So, because again, initially implementing procedures, it's as of a point in time. It doesn't necessarily reflect that it's going to be, the same thing in, 2 years, 3 years. But by having that robust document control system, you can basically make sure you're recording your reviews for one thing. So you have records of that, just because that's a requirement of the standard. But the big intent of it is just making sure that they remain up to date.
Right.
So, and you can get busy and forget to do that over time. But if you have a system in place, and even like Core helps with, the automatic reminders that you're supposed to be reviewing the documents, at certain intervals. So, and you can kind of change that over time with, depending on what types of procedures or documents you're putting in place. Eventually, sometimes they might not change as frequently as other areas. So, with a good document control system, you can kind of determine different types of frequencies for different types of documents.
Not everything is a year. Not everything's 6 months.
That's right.
Maybe they're more, maybe they're less.
Yep.
But it helps you find that balance.
That's exactly right. And initially, you kind of might standardize it to once a year. But over time, certain things might not change that frequently, so you can create different types of document classes. And some of them you review once a year, some you might do every 2 years, or for newer procedures in certain departments, you might want to look at them every 6 months.
Yeah.
So a little bit more frequently.
Right.
But that's one piece of it. Another piece is making sure you're conducting regular audits so that you're identifying issues and making sure things are up to date and accurately reflected of what's going on in the business. And then ensuring that people, your employees, have access to the latest versions of documents.
Right.
So that's the big piece as well, is they have regular access to the documents that they need to utilize. Then, it's not all on one person. Other people might identify, this doesn't quite make sense with what we're doing today.
Right.
And they can help point out some of those things.
And also make sure that they're not using the wrong ones that's older after an update or something has changed to make it better. And you leave the old document there People aren't aware of, here's the new way we should be doing it.
That's exactly right. And with part of that, that's where it kind of comes into the audit a little bit. If you're regularly auditing those things, is you can kind of see where people are going to access information. Because over time, in my experience in the past, is people might download it to their desktop for quick access. And then if it's not going to a shared location, at that point, they're not accessing the most up-to-date information.
You're like, why is this thing five revisions old? Oh, there's a new revision? Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
So talk to me about tracking and analyzing quality objectives and KPIs.
So it's basically setting up clear and measurable goals, helping to collect data regularly, and then using those tools to monitor your performance.
Okay.
But it helps identify areas for improvement and basically ensuring that a company is continuing to meet their standards over time.
Okay. And I'm assuming that within doing that, we're talking about looking at those objectives and KPIs. It helps management look at what's important and where there may be trends or problems.
Absolutely. And a lot of times your objectives, when you set those up, are tied to areas of risk within the business. So,
right.
If you're always performing well in a certain area and always meeting your targets, it's time to get a new objective.
Yeah.
If you're not identifying if you have an objective that you can't really improve upon, well, then you just need to go to a new objective.
Yeah.
Certain things might be required by certain customers or even certain contracts. So, those you have to measure. But beyond those, it's important to have things that tie to some of the areas of risk within the business, because those are the things we want to improve.
Absolutely. So let's move a little bit to something different. What should you be measuring and paying attention to when it comes to customer feedback? Not just your processes and such like we talked about, but when we're talking about customers.
Yep. So one of the things is just general customer satisfaction levels. So this could be a survey, could be a quick survey, but you could have survey results that kind of just gauge, what level of customer satisfaction. That's the more proactive method of, what are their perceptions of you as a company. Another one is product quality. So and that could be in the forms of potentially rejects, returns, like for manufacturing companies, there might be a return.
Right.
So that'd be kind of tie into product quality. On-time delivery is a big one.
Yeah.
So that's really one of the bottom line measurements that companies are looking for, either services or products being delivered by a certain time. So
that can be, if you're a service company, on-time delivery can mean how quickly do you respond?
It could be. It could be your responsiveness. But again, that's kind of ties into on-time delivery of either responses, service delivery, product delivery. But on-time is a big one. And then for service companies, if there's any service delivery issues. So if there's issues with, basically the services you're providing, if things get communicated back, it's important to track those. We talked a little bit last week is, documenting your non-conformances. Again, that's, ISO language, but those service delivery issues that you're being notified about from customers, it's important to track those so that you can identify how many are occurring and is there an ongoing trend that we can improve upon.
Really show your customer that you're aware of things that aren't quite good enough or that they feel is a problem, that they're feeling there might be a problem, and also helps their experience in addressing them. Okay, they care.
Absolutely.
They're not just here to take my money and give me something. At the beginning of this and also last week, we talked about management and their key role in your QMS. How can you make sure that management review is being effective? So one big point is to kind of have a structured agenda of what are the things we're going to talk about. So you don't have to again, we have generally a standard template that we use for, the main things that to be in compliance with ISO standards, there's certain things that you should be talking about throughout your management review process. Some of those things you talk about every management review meeting. Some you talk about once or twice a year. Right.
But having the structured agenda, that's important for what you're going to be talking about. Making sure you involve the key stakeholders and your management team. So making sure the right people are involved with the management review. Making sure that you're reviewing your performance data. Again, data is very important.
There's a reason we track this stuff.
There is. And it's making sure we have the right metrics that we're measuring. Because again, over time, some objectives, you get to that point where you're always
We're
meeting
good
your
on that,
objectives.
yeah.
So let's move on and start measuring something else that we need to improve upon. Taking action on the decisions that you're making. So again, with your management review, there's, certain things you're reviewing. There's decisions that you're going to be making based on actions or issues that might be arising, but making sure you have actionable items coming out of that meeting is a big piece. And then with those items, making sure we assign due dates and assign those actions to a specific owner.
Okay.
So if you kind of leave it with a department, or even if you left it with a couple people, it might get missed.
Yeah, Bob didn't do that? Oh, I thought we never talked about it. Yeah.
Yep.
And there you
So
are.
one of the biggest things for effectiveness is, again, the actions that you're identifying during the meeting that you need to take action on. You just make sure you have a clear due date and a clear owner of those action items.
And I think something that Brian has talked about before is make sure you deal with inputs and outputs in the management review. So make sure you're reviewing those actionable items, the next management review, and then, like you're saying here, these are the outputs. What are we assigning? Who gets to do them? What do we need to do? Those types of things.
Absolutely. Yeah, those action items coming out of the meeting, that's the last thing you kind of typically discuss, making sure and reviewing, do we have it assigned to somebody? Do we have a due date? And then the next management review meeting, those are the first things you're going to review is the action items from the previous meeting.
Quick question. When you said, having a structured agenda, I could see that, and this isn't pushback, but a question. I can see that as if you follow the same structured agenda each time, that would be easy to fall into complacency on that. Although we talk about this all the time, every time we do this. Is there a way, when you say structured, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do the same thing each time, just make sure you're hitting certain points, or what?
That's right. The structured agenda is just, there are certain things you have to review over the course of a year. But certain things you're going to review. So like some companies do management reviews quarterly, some do them twice a year, some do them monthly. It kind of depends on often things are changing, or basically how much risk there is for certain areas within the business. Now, startup companies probably want to do them a little more frequently because things are changing more often. But established companies, things don't change quite as much. So you probably do your meetings a little less frequently.
And probably not trying to cover everything every meeting.
That's
every
exactly
management
right.
review, I should say, is going to be beneficial. So it's still structured. It's just not the same thing each time. There are certain things you need to talk about each time, but it's not the same.
Exactly. So, there's certain things you do talk about every time, like, your objectives.
Right.
So, like, how are we performing? Because objectives, you have measurable targets that you're trying to hit. So, you don't want to wait to just like at the end of the year to review how you performed. Those you'd review every meeting because, again, you can adjust throughout the year if you're not meeting your objectives. Well, what things do we need to put in place to get back on track?
Yeah. And I think something that Suzanne Strasser talked about was integrate them into your regular business meetings. Your senior leadership, they meet more often than a management review.
They do.
Don't just make it a management review as a separate exercise. Talk about some of this ISO stuff, required ISO stuff, in your business meetings and spread it out. When you're going to look at specific data, why not just make that part of it? You just need to keep some minutes, and this is what we talked about, and notate it, and there you are.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. You could absolutely integrate it with your normal business meetings. Just most companies are normal, like, if they're doing a weekly management team meeting, they're not necessarily always keeping minutes.
Right.
So one of the requirements is for ISO is when they talk about typically your kind of formal management review, those you have to keep minutes and records of. So, but you could keep that as part of your weekly meeting. It's just, once a month or once a quarter, basically have to document your minutes.
Yeah. Good way to make it not a separate exercise.
Absolutely.
So how important is ISO-related training to employees? We talk about it, but why is it so important?
So for your normal employees, it's good to have a general overview, even just upon hire. So, you have a new employee, they're, part of their orientation. It's good to bring them in right off the bat and just make sure they have a general awareness of what we have in place, which this could include general training on like your quality policy, what your quality objectives are. So, what are the things we measure and how can they contribute to achieving those objectives? What are their roles and responsibilities within your management system? And it's just even within your normal business processes, it's important to have roles and responsibilities defined. It's important to go through an overview of risk-based thinking. So again, when they identify problems, bring those up, clearly communicate those things so that we can take action to address those
Right,
risks
right.
and opportunities. Going over like what the process approach is, that's important for general awareness, because every process, basically they have an input to the process and they have an output from the process that goes on to the next area. And then also continuous improvement. Obviously, we always want to identify areas. And again, there might not be a problem, but maybe somebody has identified that there's an enhancement or there's a better way to do something.
Yeah.
So again, that's all part of continuous improvement. But
I think a lot of these we actually have, the last three that you talked about, risk-based thinking, process approach, and continuous improvement, those are key things within ISO 9001. If you're a core customer, we do offer training in core that is called employee training to help you with some of these things. So you don't have to necessarily sit down and come up with your own training.
no,
It's available to you.
absolutely. Yes. I mean, we have great tools to help with general awareness training. And then we also have a lot of, there's additional training then beyond just general employee awareness. So additional training should be provided to your leaders, and that specifically, most companies identify a management representative.
Right.
That's the person that kind of make sure not that they have ownership of everything, but they kind of keep a little bit of oversight to make sure certain things are being done. Your management representative, your process owners, and other people that might have specific roles and responsibilities within the management system, which that could include, as you mature your system, maybe there's a document control coordinator, or you could have somebody that kind of coordinates the corrective action, making sure things are being closed out and driven towards closure for improvement over time. But there's additional training that you need to do for those that have a more
roles,
integrated role within the system. But this helps ensure they understand the ISO standard and then really the associated clauses. So the clauses, not that you have to have those memorized.
No, but understand where it's coming
standard.
from, why you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
And some of that.
But yeah.
Most of this is taken care of, that you can watch training and take that training from within core.
Absolutely. Yeah. And within core, there are specific training plans depending on what your role is within the company. If you're a management representative versus if you're a process owner, or if you're just a top executive, that you just need kind of the general overview of some of those things. Yes, there's a lot of training tools available right in the system.
So if you're a core customer, there's no excuse for not having somebody at least know where the training is.
Absolutely.
Okay. So before we are audited, whether it's a certification audit or whether it's surveillance, we got to do internal audits. What's the best way to make those count?
So the first point would be just making sure you're conducting them at regular interval.
You mean not right before the audit?
That's right.
Or before one of the bigger audits?
Yes. And I mean, when you're initially certified, you're conducting it just before the audit with the registrar.
Right. That's just the way it lands.
Yep, that's the way it lands. But then over time, it's good to kind of make sure you can back that up so it's not like right before the audit. You can do them, you can space your audits out throughout the year. Now, if you're outsourcing internal audits to a company like Core Business Solutions, then you would still do those at regular intervals. You'd probably want to do it a little bit earlier than whenever the registrar audit is coming up for the external party. But it's important to involve experienced auditors. So making sure if you're doing it internally, you have some redundancy, because you can't audit things you're responsible for.
Right. There's certain things you can't. There's some rules there of who can audit what. And that's one of the reasons we do provide external, internal audits, if you will. Yeah. Is because not everybody, if you're a 2 or 3 man company, maybe you can't audit it because you are involved in all the work.
Absolutely. So, but yeah, having experienced auditors, making sure we focus on critical areas. So you can set your own frequencies for certain areas. So if there's certain areas where there's more risk or more opportunities for failures, then it's, those things you want to audit more frequently, because that's where you're going to identify the bigger areas of issues or risks within the company. But it's important, like when you do the audits, like any findings, which could be a nonconformance, could be just an opportunity for improvement, but using those findings really to drive improvements. Yeah, so again, looking at them as opportunities, not mistakes necessarily.
Yeah, not a pass-fail.
Yep.
Nonconformance doesn't mean a fail. It just means an opportunity to improve.
Yep. Yeah, driving those improvements. And again, just thinking of those findings, those are really opportunities and not problems.
Right.
Because the entire point of identifying those internally is to identify areas that you can improve upon before they really become bigger issues.
Yeah. Or more widespread.
That's right. And the last piece I would mention is making sure that you focus your corrective actions that you're taking towards improvement of the process. So we're never directing things towards a person's behavior. If you're stopping with giving a person more training, or in my past experience, if you put them on like a performance improvement plan, that's not really a corrective action. That's an immediate action, but it's not a long-term prevention to try to prevent things from occurring over time.
Yeah, because you've got to find, and we talk about this in other podcasts, the root cause of the problem. Most of the time, it's not an individual.
Absolutely.
So don't look at it as always saying, well, that's Joe's fault. Well, Joe may have done it incorrectly, but why did Joe do it incorrectly? Well, he was never trained on it. Oh, well, there's no documentation on it. Oh, well, don't look at it just being Joe's fault if he actually did or didn't do it. But what's the why? Look at the reasons, not just that individual.
Yep, it's important to focus on the process.
Yep. Really insightful again, as always today. Any last thoughts you have?
No, I think covered quite a bit today. And the big piece is just, again, making sure you kind of integrate things and making sure that you get your team involved to help maintain the system over time. So it's not just, the quality department's function. It's really integrated throughout the business.
Yeah. You've got to make it part of your business. And that's the only way you're going to see the true benefits from it. There is return on investment on this thing if you use it properly.
Absolutely.
Well, certainly do appreciate you being here. Always a pleasure. And I got to see you 2 weeks in a row, which is great. And we talked about pizza last time and other things this time.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, great being here again.
And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, now that we're an LRQA company, and how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, customized training, even maybe help you, tweak your QMS a little bit better, please reach out to us and email us at info@thecoresolution.com. Now, you can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, please be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day.